Welcome back to Upside Down Data. Let's talk about why alts are set to explode. So all of this, of course, has to do with the recent events of the election with Trump winning. And as we all know, Trump positioned himself as the pro-crypto candidate. So Crypto Briefing put together in this article a list of things Trump said he would do relating to crypto. And there are a few that I want to call out here as being especially relevant to altcoins and why I think this sets altcoins up very nicely going forward. So the one I wanted to call out is removing Gary Gensler as the head of the SEC. Obviously, Gary Gensler has been extremely anti-crypto, and removing him, and especially if he's replaced with someone much more lenient towards crypto, would be very useful for a lot of crypto projects. You also might expect some of these current lawsuits to either be dropped or otherwise go away. The other one I wanted to call out is just this general ending of regulatory pressure on crypto. Obviously, the Biden administration broadly, including Gary Gensler, has been quite anti-crypto, a lot of pressure on crypto and on, for example, banks that were banking crypto companies. That is all set to be changing. And so overall, what this kind of suggests for the altcoin market is that one of the big headwinds that have been holding it down, especially things like DeFi, is now likely to be lifted, or at least much relaxed. And what that means is now these assets might be more attractive to a broader set of investors. Some investors have probably been staying away because they just didn't know if the SEC was just going to come in and shut it down or sue them, or who knows what would have happened. If that is all made more clear now, and it's not seeming like the US government's going to be trying to shut down a bunch of different crypto projects, it becomes much more attractive. And so you see here, I'm showing you the total market cap excluding Bitcoin. So this is Ethereum plus all the other altcoins exploding upwards following Trump's election. And this is really in response to these exact things I've been talking about, this much more supportive environment in the United States for crypto versus what we've had for the last 4 years. So given that, what I want to talk about is where do alts stand right now in terms of their relative upside potential? How far could this rally go? Now, it's not going to be straight up, but it could be pretty explosive, and it could be a very nice rally, even clearing to new highs or well beyond that on their total market cap. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I want to start this conversation by talking about some of our models that we have here at the channel. So this is our long-term upside downside potential indicator. And I want to talk about Ethereum first because it is the largest non-Bitcoin asset that there is. Now, Ethereum is interesting to look at here because its risk had been quite low back over here in September and is still fairly low even with this recent move up. So if we just go back over here and look at Ethereum, see it really shot up, and it's doing so from a position of relatively low risk. So that is a good sign, suggesting that Ethereum might have a lot of upside potential to work with in a new bullish phase of the market cycle that could break its new all-time highs and above. And when Ethereum does well, broader altcoin markets tend to do well also. So we can also look at something like Solana, which has become basically solidified itself as the third prominent crypto project. And we can see that Solana is a little bit higher on its long-term risk, but still not very elevated, much lower than it was back here, for example, in December, or back in the second peak here in March and April, certainly lower than it was back here in late 2021. So if it wants to move, it's got room to work with. And we can also just take a broader view. So what I'm showing you here is the price is still Solana, but this is not the risk model for Solana. This is instead an average of the UDPIs for a bunch of different altcoins. So this is not including Ethereum in this one. This is all things that are not Bitcoin, not Ethereum. So we have BNB, XRP, ADA, basically the largest market cap altcoins that we have models for, threw a bunch of them together. And then I created this custom formula, basically just averaging them together. This is using our workbench tool that we have on our website, claritydigital.io. Link is in the description. And what's nice about this tool is that you can do things like this. You can say, what is kind of the average risk across a basket of assets? You can just go ahead and make that and take a look. What you can see is that we're still fairly low. We're down at negative 1.34, where if we are entering into a very bullish phase of the market cycle based on this new event, this new catalyst of Trump being elected president and then likely to enact all of these pro-crypto moves once in office, I think this entire scale, the entire top part of the scale is probably in play, at which point the odds really seem to be in alt's favor at the current moment. So obviously this is not financial advice. You should make your own opinions. But that's what I'm seeing, is that the data have been pointing for a while towards us kind of going out of the middle phases of the bull market and entering more into the end game. And the good news about the end game is that it can be quite explosive. Let's just go back and take a look at Ethereum here, for example. You can argue that this cycle, the last cycle from 18 all the way through 2021, started through here, but really not a whole lot happened until suddenly you got here to late 2020 when this big explosion happened, this big move up. Sure, there was quite a bit of growth from here to here, but you got this massive move up that happened afterwards. And a lot of altcoins look like this. Some gains early on, but really this big explosive move was the main event. And so that's where we're heading. And we're sitting at this point, and we think we're going to go back up to these points. That's a pretty good setup. Now, not financial advice, as I said before. A lot of this is going to depend on, for example, avoiding a recession. All that kind of caveats and everything applies. But I do think that this is the clearest go signal that we've had for alts in a very long time. Certainly for me, this is the most bullish I've felt on alts since back over here, basically going into late 2023 when you had that big run up with a lot of altcoins over here. But this suggests an environment that might even be more bullish for them, because you can imagine this narrative of Trump taking over and, saying at least that he's going to make the United States this really pro-crypto place, that could really add a lot of hype and rocket fuel, and also allow different altcoin projects to become more adventurous in what they do, because they're not worrying about the SEC coming in and slapping them as being a security. So that's where, for me personally, flipping over here to CoinMarketCap, looking at their DeFi token market cap, this is one category I'm going to be watching closely, because DeFi is an area that's been under a lot of pressure, regulatory speaking, that oftentimes things that DeFi protocols want to do, like for example, Uniswap had talked about making fees that they are generating being things that they pay out to token holders. Well, they hadn't been wanting to do that because that looks an awful lot like a security. But if suddenly you now have an SEC that's a lot more lenient, maybe they go ahead and do that. And now suddenly Uni looks much more attractive as an asset than it did before, where it was really just a governance token that didn't do anything. I think a lot of these DeFi protocols now have a lot more to work with, especially the ones that are popular, that are actually generating revenue. They can start doing really creative things with that revenue potentially that make them more attractive. And so you see massive moves across a lot of DeFi protocols as you just scroll up here on the 7-day, for example, Radium of 50%. And that is, I think, partly due to this exact reasoning, that they were under a lot of pressure. So part of this is relief potentially from that pressure the market is pricing in, but then also the expectation of what they could do beyond that. And I do frankly think there's probably going to be new projects that get released doing all sorts of more adventurous things now that they don't have to worry about this. And so that could be something that would fuel that next move up. What are the narratives that are going to fuel the next leg up? Well, those might be born out of this leniency that the market sees coming, more risk-taking, kind of more extreme positions that these protocols might take in terms of what they do, and that could then add rocket fuel to their price. So that's one possibility. That's the narrative, a hypothesis of what that narrative could be that could take things higher. All right, so to finally kind of wrap us up then a little bit on this about how high could things go, right? And I want to use the last cycle as kind of a benchmark. So this is a snapshot on CoinMarketCap from basically the top of the last cycle, late November 2021. And we can see the different market caps of the different assets at this point in time. So when you look at the top of it, what's interesting about right now is that actually Bitcoin is well above its prior market cap at that point. So from the last cycle, this was this market cap top. Not surprisingly, since price is above and there's more supply in the market now, it's of course higher now as well. But what's interesting is going down the line a little bit with some of these. You can see that Ethereum is still well below its prior all-time high market cap. That was all the way up at 500 billion. Now it's only at 351, considerably lower. But even as you go down, the notable difference is Solana is actually higher market cap now than it was back then. But you go down this snapshot, you see how many had these very large market caps as you get down further in, these protocols. Even as you get down into the 30s, for example, you're still well in the billions. If you look at it right now, it doesn't take nearly as long before you start dropping well out. By the time you get into the 30s now, you're sitting only at about 2 billion. Here it was all the way, back in the 6 billions of market caps. And what that just goes to show us is that, Bitcoin's at all-time highs, it's doing very well. Altcoins are still lagging well behind. And we saw that at the very beginning when we're talking about the total market cap of altcoins. It's not anywhere near all-time highs. So that means that if this is now an environment that's conducive to altcoins, they have so much room to grow, even just to match what they did at the top of the last cycle. And then if we think that this could be a full-on new bull run, where you'd expect things to go beyond that to set new highs, then you'd actually expect this to go even further than this. So that's where there's a lot of opportunity, that we're not even anywhere close to where we were last time around near the top. And then that might or may not even be a reasonable benchmark, because in the past, when crypto has these bull markets, you don't stop at the prior all-time high, you blast through it and you set a new all-time high in prices and especially in market caps. I think you would expect that this time around if we were to get that full-on cycle. So that could look like for assets like Ethereum, but frankly, just a lot of other altcoins, like here's Solana, for example, which is getting closer to all-time highs, but just any number. Here's Chainlink, which is still sitting well below prior all-time highs, you name it. There's a lot of room to work with a lot of these assets. Now, some of them will perform better than others, and that's where I think it's going to be important to watch these narratives. Like, for example, with DeFi, do they suddenly start doing more creative things that, without having to worry about regulatory issues, that make them much more attractive? There are going to be certain narratives that take off, catch fire, and really pump hard. That's what happens every single cycle. And so it's important to keep an eye on that and not get caught behind or just ignore it and think it's just a passing fad, because then you miss the entire move. So I'm going to be keeping my ear to the ground, but it's things like DeFi, things that were under a lot of regulatory pressure, or maybe just ideas that weren't possible because of regulatory pressure, but maybe are more possible now, that you might want to look at and think about. So obviously, those are just my views. You should make of this and of the data as you will. But I think this is an exciting time in the crypto space, not just for Bitcoin. One of the things I did want to mention is the reason why I think altcoins are the place to look right now, and not just Bitcoin, which is saying new all-time highs, is that you'll notice that altcoins tend to run later than Bitcoin in these moves. Bitcoin goes first, then altcoins follow. And so that's why I think it's notable to be talking about alts right now, because they're lagging behind like they have done every cycle. But Bitcoin's at new all-time highs. It's already there. It's already moving. Where the bigger room seems to be left is altcoins, and that's why I'm focused on that right now. Of course, there is greater risk in alts. If we had a recession, they would crash harder, so on and so forth. We already know that. But I do think that in a full-on bull market, that is where the lion's share of the gains are going to be. So I'm much more interested in what they're doing right now than for Bitcoin. Although, of course, I'm still paying attention to Bitcoin, because as it continues to rally and if it really rips, that tends to be the precursor to a big altcoin move. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates on our models and more over there. And go to our website, polaritydigital.io, to see live data from our models and more.